Did you know that Gene Simmons, the legendary demon from Kiss, is back in the headlines again? And no, it's not just about his bass, his fire-breathing stage acts, or the outrageous theatrics that made Kiss one of the biggest rock bands in history. This time, it's about something that's got fans talking, news outlets buzzing, and even legal experts weighing in. If you've been following along, you know that whenever Gene Simmons makes headlines, it's never small. It's always loud, it's always dramatic, and it always gets people debating. So what's happening now? Well, recently stories began surfacing that Gene Simmons had become involved in a lawsuit. At first, the reports sounded confusing. Some outlets claimed it was about intellectual property. Others whispered that it had something to do with his personal finances. And in the middle of all that noise, Simmons's team quickly stepped in, calling many of the stories grossly exaggerated. But that only made people more curious, because whenever someone tries to tone down the drama, it usually means there's more under the surface. And in Gene Simmons's case, there usually is. Think about it. This is a man who's built his entire career on creating an image, literally the makeup, the costumes, the branding, the whole persona of the demon. For decades, Kiss has been more than a band. It's been a brand, a business, an empire. Their merchandise alone has pulled in millions. From t-shirts to lunchboxes, from comic books to coffins, yes, coffins with the Kiss logo on them. This band knows how to market. So when news comes out that Simmons is in a legal fight, especially about trademarks or imagery, it makes perfect sense. Because if there's one thing Gene has always defended, it's the Kiss legacy. Now let's clear the air a little, because there's been a lot of confusion around this. Rumor number one, that Simmons went after someone for copying Kiss's iconic face paint designs. People ran wild with that idea, imagining Simmons storming into court with the makeup on, demanding justice. But here's the truth. Yes, there's a legal case, but it's not quite as wild as some tabloids made it sound. According to legal filings, the issue is more about unauthorized use of Kiss trademarks on merchandise. In plain English, someone somewhere was making money off Kiss's brand without permission. And Simmons isn't about to let that slide. Rumor number two, that Gene Simmons is retiring. This one spread like wildfire after a couple of interviews where he hinted at slowing down. But when asked directly in a recent call with a media outlet, Simmons shot that idea down. He said retirement isn't even on the table. And if you think about it, does retirement even fit Gene Simmons's personality? This is a guy who's been on stage for decades, who thrives on being larger than life. Hanging up the boots, or in this case, the platform shoes? That doesn't sound like him at all. So what do we actually know for sure? Here's what's been confirmed. The lawsuit was filed in a city court. It centers on a company using Kiss imagery on products without authorization. Simmons himself addressed it, saying something along the lines of, "I built this with sweat, makeup, and commitment. If someone takes the signs, they'll see I fight for legacy." That's not just a legal stance. That's personal. Because for Simmons, Kiss isn't just about the music. It's about the identity, the empire, the years of work that turned four guys in face paint into one of the most recognizable brands in the world. And that's where this hits differently. Imagine putting decades of your life into building something, shaping an image that fans across the globe instantly recognize, and then finding out that someone is trying to use it without asking. It's not just about money, though of course money plays a part. It's about pride. It's about protecting what you created. Fans understand this too. I've heard from collectors who say they've been buying Kiss memorabilia since the mid-'80s. Not because it was trendy, but because each item represented a piece of their own story. For them, the band's image isn't just business. It's personal. It's identity. Now here's the tricky part. What we don't know yet is how deep this lawsuit really goes. Are we talking about just one company making some knockoff shirts? Or is this part of a bigger issue? Maybe tied to old licensing deals that didn't cover today's digital marketplace. Remember, a lot of contracts from the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s didn't anticipate a world of online shops, global shipping, and instant distribution. If those deals weren't updated, there could be big gaps that other companies tried to take advantage of. And that's exactly the kind of situation that leads to these messy court battles. Here's another question. How involved is Simmons personally? Is he making the calls himself, or is this more his legal and management team handling things in the background? With celebrities, it's often hard to know. Sometimes they're hands-on, signing every document and approving every strategy. Other times, they're just briefed once a week while the lawyers do the heavy lifting. But knowing Gene Simmons' personality, I wouldn't be surprised if he's paying very close attention. There's also a side of this that a lot of people miss: how trademark law actually works. Trademark experts have said that these kinds of cases, especially involving designs, can be complicated. You have to prove that the design is distinctive and that the public clearly associates it with you. And Kiss face paint? That's about as distinctive as it gets. But here's the catch. If someone else has used something even close to it in another context, that can weaken your claim. That's why these fights can drag on, because proving uniqueness isn't always as straightforward as it looks. I actually spoke with a merch designer who's worked with big bands before, and they told me that one of the biggest problems is that many artists never go back to update their contracts. So while they were ironclad in the 1980s, they don't always cover what happens in a world where e-commerce rules. That gap creates opportunities for others to jump in, make money, and then argue later that the original deal doesn't apply. That's exactly the kind of situation we're seeing with Gene Simmons now, and then there's Gene's own words. In a recent interview, he said something powerful. A legacy isn't given. It's defended. That one line says everything you need to know about why he's fighting this. To him, this isn't just paperwork. It's about making sure that everything he's built, every show, every song, every mask, every logo, continues to belong where it belongs, with Kiss, with the band, with the legacy he's worked so hard to protect. So what happens next? Well, a court date has already been set to address preliminary motions. That means lawyers are going to argue about what evidence can be used, what claims can go forward, and what might get tossed. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes legal wrangling that most fans won't see, but it's where the shape of the case really gets decided. And if it goes forward, we could see documents, contracts, and old deals coming into the public eye. And that's always fascinating, because you never know what's hiding in those old agreements. At the same time, there's talk that Kiss has some anniversary projects coming up. Maybe a tour, maybe a merch drop. If that happens, this lawsuit could directly impact what fans see. Because if there's a fight over trademarks and imagery, it could delay or change how new products get released. Imagine being a fan, waiting for the big anniversary merch, only to find out that half of it is tied up in legal red tape. That's not fun for anyone. And here's where I want to bring it back to you, the fans. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about court cases, contracts, and legal strategy all day long. But what really matters is how fans feel. Do you think Gene Simmons is right to defend every piece of the legacy, even if it means dragging people into court? Or do you think sometimes it goes too far, and maybe this is just about money? It's a tough question because the line between protecting art and protecting business is often very thin. Personally, I think this shows how much Simmons still cares. If he were checked out, if he were really ready to retire, he might let this slide. But he's not. He's still here, still watching, still making sure that the demon, the brand, the empire of Kiss stays in his control. And whether you love him or hate him, you have to admit, that's dedication. So here's my take. This isn't the last time we'll hear about this. More documents are going to come out. More statements will be released. And every time it'll spark a new wave of debates. Because Gene Simmons has always thrived on attention, and as long as he's around, there will always be headlines. But what about you? Do you think Simmons is fighting the good fight? Or is this just another rock star trying to hold on to something too tightly? I want to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I love seeing different perspectives. And hey, if this story interested you, you might want to check out my other video where we talk about how celebrities protect their image and likeness. It connects directly with what's happening here, and you'll see just how common these battles really are in the entertainment industry. If you enjoyed hanging out here today, do me a favor. Hit that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next update. Because trust me, with Gene Simmons, there will be a next update. Thanks for watching, friends. Until next time, rock on.